In the sun-drenched glamour of 1920s Merlinville, a desperate letter summons Hercule Poirot to save millionaire Paul Ronaldon, to find him shot dead on his tennis court, buried in a shallow grave. A cryptic note whispers of Devon and Santiago, while crimson silk, a shattered watch, and a lipstick-stained cigarette weave a web of deception. Was it his grieving widow, her secret lover, or a ghost from his shadowy past? As lies unravel, Poirot's little gray cells uncover a chilling truth of love, greed, and betrayal. Who pulled the trigger? The clock is ticking. Solve the mystery. Chapter 1. The Urgent Summons. The morning sun filtered through the lace curtains of my modest London flat, casting delicate patterns across the breakfast table. I, Captain Arthur Hastings, lately returned from the Argentine, was savoring a particularly fine kipper when the post arrived with its customary clatter. Among the usual bills and circulars lay a letter addressed in a firm, unfamiliar hand to my friend and occasional landlord, Hercule Poirot. The envelope, postmarked from France, bore an air of urgency that piqued my curiosity. Poirot, seated opposite, was as immaculate as ever. His patent leather shoes gleamed, his mustache was waxed to perfection, and his gray eyes sparkled with that peculiar alertness which I had come to associate with the stirring of his remarkable intellect. He slit the envelope with a silver knife, his movements precise, and drew out a single sheet of heavy cream paper. As he read, his eyebrows lifted, and a faint smile curved his lips. "Mon ami," he said, fixing me with a look that promised adventure. "What would you say to a little voyage to France?" "France," I echoed, setting down my coffee. "What's this about, Poirot?" He passed me the letter, and I read it with growing astonishment. It was penned by a certain Paul Renaud, a gentleman of considerable means, residing at the Villa Genevieve in Merlinville-sur-Mer, a fashionable resort on the northern coast. The tone was one of barely concealed panic. "Monsieur Poirot, I implore your aid. My life is in danger, and I know not where to turn. Vague threats have reached me, shadows that move in the night. I cannot trust the local authorities. Your reputation alone gives me hope. Come at once, I beg you, and name your fee. Time is of the essence. Yours in desperation, Paul Renaud." The words sent a thrill through me. Renaud's wealth was hinted at in the quality of the stationery, yet his fear was palpable, as though the ink itself trembled. I glanced at Poirot, whose expression had grown grave. A most intriguing summons. "Hastings," he murmured, tapping the letter with a manicured finger. "This Monsieur Renaud, he does not exaggerate, I think. There is a precision in his terror, man who knows too much, or perhaps too little, of his peril." "Do you know him?" I asked. Poirot shook his head. "Nan, but his name is not unknown. A financier, I believe, with interests in South America. The papers have mentioned him discreetly, as such men prefer. But this," he gestured to the letter, "this is no idle fancy. We must go to him." The decision was made with that swiftness peculiar to Poirot when his curiosity was aroused. Within the hour, our bags were packed, mine with the haphazard enthusiasm of youth, Poirot's with the meticulous care of a man who could not abide a wrinkled shirt. As we hailed a taxi for Victoria Station, I ventured a question. "What do you make of these vague threats, Poirot? A business rival, perhaps, or something more personal?" He settled into the cab, his small frame erect, his eyes distant. "Threats, mon ami, are like footprints in the sand, meaningless without context. But the mention of shadows that move in the night, that is suggestive. It speaks of secrecy, of betrayal close to home. We shall see." The journey to Calais was uneventful, save for Poirot's fastidious complaints about the train's upholstery and the lamentable state of the tea. I, meanwhile, found my thoughts drifting to Merlinville, a place I knew only from society columns as a haven for the wealthy and idle. What danger could lurk in such a paradise? The question nagged at me as the ferry bore us across the channel, the gray waves churning beneath a sky heavy with promise. We reached Calais by late afternoon and transferred to a local train from Poirot, ever observant, studied his fellow passengers, a stout dowager with a yapping Pekingese, a nervous young man clutching a briefcase, a pair of giggling schoolgirls, but found nothing to remark upon. As the train rattled through the French countryside, he leaned back, his fingers steepled, and I knew his mind was already at work, sifting the sparse facts of Renaud's letter for hidden truths. It was nearing dusk when we alighted at Merlinville's quaint station. The air was warm, scented with sea salt and jasmine, and the town's elegance was evident in the whitewashed villas peeping through lush gardens. A porter directed us to a waiting car, arranged, he said, by Monsieur Renaud's household. But, as we approached, a man in a dark suit stepped forward, his face drawn and official. "Monsieur," he inquired, his accent clipped. "Oui, c'est moi," Poirot replied, his tone courteous but wary. "I am Lucien Bex, commissary of police. I regret to inform you that Monsieur Renaud is beyond your aid. He was found dead this morning, murdered." The word struck like a thunderclap. I felt a jolt of dismay, but Poirot's expression remained impassive, though his eyes narrowed. "Murdered, you say? When, and how?" "On his tennis court, at the Villa Genevieve," Bex replied. "Shot through the heart, sometime in the night. The magistrate, Monsieur Hotet, awaits you. He hopes your expertise may assist us." Poirot nodded, but I saw the flicker of frustration in his gaze. We had come too late to save Paul Renaud, but the mystery of his death now lay before us, as tantalizing and perilous as the shadows he had feared. As the car sped toward the villa, I glanced at my friend, whose silence was that of a hunter, scenting his quarry. The game, as he so often called it, had begun. Chapter R. The Villa Genevieve car wound through Merlinville's winding lanes, its tires crunching softly on the gravel as twilight settled over the town. The sea air carried a faint tempest of salt, mingling with the perfume of blooming oleanders that lined the road. I, Arthur Hastings, sat beside Hercule Poirot, my mind still reeling from Commissary Bex's grim announcement. Paul Renaud, the man whose desperate letter had summoned us across the channel, was dead, murdered on his own tennis court. The word murder hung in the air like a storm cloud, and I glanced at Poirot, expecting some remark, some flash of insight. But he was silent, his small hands folded neatly in his lap, his eyes fixed on the passing scenery with an intensity that belied his calm. The Villa Genevieve loomed into view as we crested a gentle hill, its white stucco walls glowing faintly in the fading light. It was a handsome structure, modern yet elegant, with tall windows and a red-tiled roof that spoke of wealth and taste. A wrought iron gate stood open, flanked by manicured hedges, and beyond it, a drive led to the house, where several figures milled about, policemen, I presumed, and perhaps servants, their silhouettes stark against the lit windows. The scene was one of quiet chaos, the kind that follows a sudden tragedy, and I felt a shiver of anticipation. What secrets lay within those walls? Commissary Bex, a lean man with a sharp nose and a manner both courteous and guarded, led us up the drive. "Monsieur Hotet, the examining magistrate, is eager to meet you, Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice low. "Your reputation precedes you, even here in Merlinville." Poirot inclined his head, a gesture at once modest and "I am flattered, Monsieur Bex, but reputations are like mirrors, they reflect only what others choose to see. Let us hope Hercule Poirot may be of true service in this matter." I suppressed a smile. Poirot's penchant for theatrical humility was as familiar to me as his love of order, and I knew it masked a mind already dissecting the case with surgical precision. We passed through a set of double doors into a spacious hall, its marble floor gleaming under a chandelier that cast soft light on oil paintings and gilded mirrors. The air was heavy with the scent of lilies, arranged in a vase on a side table, and I noted the meticulous care evident in every detail. Renaud had been a man of means, and his home reflected it. A servant, a pale young woman with red eyes, took our hats and coats, her hands trembling slightly. Bex led us to a drawing room where two men awaited. The first, introduced as Monsieur Hotet, was a portly figure with a florid face and a mustache that rivaled Poirot's in grandeur, though it lacked the same fastidious curl. His eyes, keen and assessing, lit up at the sight of Poirot. "Monsieur Poirot," he exclaimed, advancing with an outstretched hand. "It is an honor, truly. When Bex informed me you were en route, I could scarcely believe our good fortune. A case such as this, Monsieur, it is perplexing, and your little gray cells are just what we need." Poirot bowed slightly, his expression unreadable. "You are most kind, Monsieur Hotet. But pray, tell me of this tragedy. Monsieur Renaud, how did it come to pass?" Before Hotet could reply, the second man stepped forward, his demeanor far less welcoming. He was young, perhaps 30, with a lean frame, slicked back hair, and a sneer that seemed permanently etched on his thin lips. His suit, though well cut, had a flashy quality, and his eyes darted about as if seeking an advantage. "Inspector Giraud Screet," he announced, his tone clipped. "I'm in charge of the investigation, Monsieur Poirot, and while I'm sure your methodists have their charm in Belgium, we in France prefer a more modern approach. Science, evidence, facts, not intuition." I bristled at the slight, but Poirot merely smiled, his eyes twinkling with what I knew to be amusement rather than offense. "Science, Monsieur Giraud, is a most admirable tool," he said smoothly. "But the human mind, it is the lens through which all evidence must pass. I look forward to observing your methods and, perhaps offering a small contribution of my own." Giraud's sneer deepened, but Hotet intervened, clapping his hands briskly. "Come, gentlemen, let us not waste time. Monsieur Poirot, you must hear the facts. Bex, fetch Madame Renaud. She will wish to speak with our distinguished guest." As Bex departed, Hotet gestured to a set of plush armchairs arranged around a low table. We sat, and he began to outline the morning's grim discovery. Paul Renaud's body had been found at dawn by a gardener, half buried in a shallow grave on the tennis court, a bullet wound clean through his heart. The court, an isolated feature of the estate, was bordered by dense shrubs, making it invisible from the house. No weapon had been found, but a local doctor estimated the time of death to be between midnight and 3 a.m. Based on the body's condition, a single shot, precise, Hotet said, his voice heavy. The grave was hastily dug scarcely deep, enough to cover him. It suggests panic, or perhaps interruption. Poirot leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "And the bullet, monsieur, it has been recovered." Hotet nodded. "Yes, lodged in the body. A small caliber, likely from a revolver. We are analyzing it, but such weapons are common enough." Giraud interjected, his tone smug. "The footprints are more telling. A single set clear in the clay near the graveman's boots, size 10, with a distinctive worn heel. I've already ordered a search for local tramps or laborers who match. This is no work of genius, Monsieur Poirot, just good police work." Poirot's lips twitched, but he said nothing, his gaze drifting to a small object on the tableau, a folded piece of paper, stained and creased. "And this, Monsieur Hotet, it is significant." Then, Hotet's eyes widened. "You have sharp eyes, Monsieur Poirot." "Yes, this was found in Renaud's Paquita note, though its meaning is obscure." He handed it to Poirot, who unfolded it with care. I leaned closer, catching sight of a hurried scrawl. "Duvin knows. The secret must not die with me. Santiago holds the key." The words sent a chill through me. Duvin who, or what was that? And Santiago. The note was cryptic, yet it carried an air of finality, as though Renaud had penned it in his last moments. Poirot's expression remained impassive, but I saw the faintest flicker of interest in his eyes. A puzzle, he murmured, folding the note and returning it to Hotet. This Douvan you have investigated, Giraud snorted. A red herring, nothing more. Probably a business associate or a code for something mundane. My men are checking Renaud's correspondence, but I doubt it will lead anywhere. The tramp is our man Mark, my words. Poirot's smile was polite, but distant, and I knew he was already dismissing Giraud's theory. Before he could press further, the door opened, and Bex ushered in a woman whose presence seemed to still the room. Madame Eloise Renaud was tall and slender, her dark hair streaked with silver, her face pale but composed. Her eyes, red from weeping, held a quiet strength, and her black silk dress rustled softly as she moved. She carried herself with the dignity of one accustomed to command. Yet there was a fragility about her, as though grief had stripped away a layer of her defenses. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low and steady, "I am told you are a man of great skill. My husband wrote to you, did he not? He feared something. If only you had come sooner." Poirot rose, bowing deeply. "Madame, my deepest condolences. I regret that fate delayed us. But rest assured, Hercule Poirot will leave no stone unturned to uncover the truth of your husband's death. May we speak of his fears?" She sank into a chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Paul was troubled these past weeks. He spoke little of it, but I saw the change in him: sleepless nights, letters he burned after reading. He mentioned enemies, men from his past in South America, but he would not elaborate. I begged him to go to the police, but he refused, saying only that he had sent for you. Poirot nodded, his eyes never leaving her face. "And this note, Madame, the mention of Douvan and Santiago. Do these names mean anything to you?" She hesitated, her fingers tightening. "Santiago, perhaps. Paul had business there, years ago, before we married. He made his fortune in land deals, I believe. But Douvan, no, it is unfamiliar." Her voice was firm, yet I sensed a flicker of unease, a shadow that Poirot surely noted. He pressed gently. "And the night of his death, Madame, you heard nothing, saw nothing?" She shook her head. "I retired early, as is my habit. Paul was in his study, working late. I awoke at dawn to the servants' cries, and then they told me." Her voice broke, and she pressed a handkerchief to her lips. Hodet cleared his throat. "Madame Renaud has been most cooperative, Monsieur Poirot. We have questioned the household. None heard a shot, which is curious, given the court's proximity." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "The tennis court, it is isolated, you say? No windows overlook it?" "None," Bex confirmed. "The shrubs form a natural screen, and the house is some distance away. A silencer, perhaps, or the sea breeze masked the sound." Poirot nodded thoughtfully, then turned back to Madame Renaud. "One final question, Madame, if I may. Your husband's study, might we examine it? Papers, perhaps, that could shed light on his fears." She rose, her composure regained. "Of course, I will show you myself." We followed her through a corridor lined with family portraits, their eyes seeming to watch our progress. The study was a masculine retreat, its walls paneled in oak, its desk strewn with papers and ledgers. A large window overlooked the gardens, now shrouded in dusk, and a safe stood in one corner, its door slightly ajar. Madame Renaud gestured to the desk. "Paul kept his business here. I seldom entered. His affairs were his own." Poirot's eyes roamed the room, lingering on the safe. "This was open when you found him, Madame." She nodded. "The police examined it. They found nothing of note. Giraud, who had trailed us, scoffed. A few contracts, some cash, nothing to build a case on. You're chasing shadows, Poirot." But Poirot was already at the desk, his gloved hands sifting through papers with the delicacy of a surgeon. He paused at a telegram, its edges crumpled, and read it silently before slipping it into his pocket. I caught a glimpse of the words, "Beware the shadow," and my pulse quickened. What did it mean? As we prepared to leave, a young man entered, his face flushed, and his manner agitated. He was perhaps 25, with dark hair and a lean build, his clothes rumpled, as though he had dressed in haste. Madame Renaud's expression softened, but only slightly. "My son, Jack," she said. "Jack, this is Monsieur Poirot, come to help us." Jack Renaud's eyes flickered with suspicion. "Help? The police are here, aren't they? What's a Belgian detective going to do that, Giraud? Can't." Giraud smirked, but Poirot's smile was unruffled. "Monsieur Jack, I seek only the truth. Perhaps you can assist. Where were you last night, when your father met his fate?" Jack's face darkened. "In my room, asleep. I heard nothing. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have matters to attend to." He strode out, leaving an awkward silence. Madame Renaud sighed. "He is grieving, Monsieur Poirot. He and Paul were not always close." Poirot nodded, but I saw the gleam in his eyes. Jack's defensiveness had not gone unnoticed. As we returned to the drawing room, Judith promised to arrange a visit to the tennis court at first light, and Bex offered us rooms at a nearby hotel. Giraud, still bristling, muttered about amateurs as he departed, but Poirot seemed unperturbed. Alone in the hall, I turned to him. "What do you make of it, Poirot? The note, the telegram, Jack's attitude, it's all so tangled." He adjusted his hat, his voice low. "Tangled, yes, mon ami, but every knot has a beginning. The note speaks of secrets, the telegram of shadows. Madame Renaud knows more than she tells, and young Jack's anger hides something. As for Giraud, he chuckled softly. He sees only the footprints, not the man who made them. Tomorrow, the tennis court will speak to Hercule Poirot." We stepped into the night, the villa's lights fading behind us. The mystery of Paul Renaud's death was deepening, and I felt the familiar thrill of the chase. Poirot, I knew, was already weaving a net of logic, and I could only hope to keep pace with the workings of his extraordinary mind. Chapter 3. The scene of the crime. The dawn broke over Merlinville, with a soft golden haze, the kind that promises a fine day but carries a whisper of secrets. I awoke in our modest hotel, my mind still tangled with the events of the previous evening at the Villa Genevieve. Paul Renaud's murder, the cryptic note, the strained demeanor of his widow and son all swirled in my thoughts as I dressed. Hercule Poirot, already impeccably attired, was sipping coffee in the hotel's small dining room when I joined him, his eyes bright with that peculiar energy that signaled his mind was fully engaged. "Bon Hastings," he greeted, setting down his cup with a delicate clink. "You have slept, I trust. For today, we must be alert. The tennis court awaits, and it will tell us much if we know how to listen." I nodded, though I confess I felt a touch of skepticism. A tennis court, after all, was merely a patch of clay and grass. What could it reveal that Giraud's scientific methods had not already uncovered? But I knew better than to question Poirot's instincts, which had an uncanny knack for unearthing truths where others saw only the obvious. We were met at the villa by Commissary Bex, his sharp features softened by the morning light, but his manner no less brisk. Inspector Giraud was conspicuously absent, a fact that did not escape Poirot's notice, though he made no comment. Monsieur Hotet, the magistrate, joined us as well, puffing slightly from the short walk across the estate. The air was cool, scented with dew and the faint brine of the nearby sea, and the villa's gardens were a riot of color, their beauty at odds with the grim purpose of our visit. The tennis court lay at the far end of the grounds, screened by a dense hedge of laurel and cypress that gave it an almost secretive air. It was a well-kept rectangle of red clay, its white lines freshly chalked, though the surface bore the scars of recent disturbance. A small group of gendarmes stood guard, their faces solemn and a patch of earth near the net had been cordoned off with rope. This, I realized, was where Renault's body had been found, though it had since been removed to the morgue. Hotet gestured toward the roped-off area. Here, Monsieur Poirot, is where the gardener discovered him half buried, as I told you. A shocking sight. Poor man. The grave was shallow, barely a foot deep, as though the killer was in haste. Poirot nodded, his eyes scanning the court with the intensity of an artist studying a canvas. He stepped forward, careful to avoid the clay, and crouched near the disturbed earth. I followed, noting the churned soil, flecked with grass and small stones. The grave, if one could call it that, was indeed crude, more a scrape than a proper excavation. Poirot's gloved fingers hovered over the ground, not touching, but tracing invisible patterns in the air. The bullet, you say, was a single shot to the heart? He asked, his voice low. Yes, Chodet confirmed. Dr. Durand, who examined the body, was quite certain. A clean wound, no exit, likely a small caliber revolver, fired at close range. No powder burns, though, which suggests a distance of at least a few feet. Poirot's lips pursed, and he rose, his gaze shifting to the surrounding hedge. And no one heard the shot, not even a muffled sound. Beck shook his head. The servants' quarters are at the rear of the house, and Madame Renaud's room faces the front. The court is isolated, and the sea breeze last night was strong. It might have masked any noise. Or a silencer was used, I ventured. Recalling Bex's earlier suggestion, Poirot glanced at me, a faint smile playing at his lips. Perhaps moan, ami, but silencers. They are not so common as the novels would have us believe. We must consider all possibilities. He turned to Totet. The body, its position, it was face down. Yes, the magistrate replied, arms at his sides, as though he fell and was dragged a short distance to the grave. The gardener found him at first light, around 6. Poirot nodded, then began a slow circuit of the court, his steps measured, his eyes darting from the clay to the hedge to the sky above. I trailed him, puzzled by his focus on seemingly trivial details: a scuff mark near the baseline, a bent twig in the hedge, a faint smear of mud on the net post. He paused at a spot some yards from the grave, where the clay was slightly compacted, and knelt again, his fingers brushing the surface. "Regardus Hastings," he said, pointing to a single, clear footprint, pressed deep into the clay. It was a man's boot, as Giraud had claimed, with a worn heel that gave it a distinctive slant. "Giraud, he makes much of this, does he not?" "He does," Beck said, a touch of weariness in his voice. "He's convinced it belongs to a tramp seen loitering in Merlinville 2 days ago. He's got half the gendarmes scouring the town for the fellow." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A tramp, you say? Convenient, Nan. But let us examine this print with care." He produced a small magnifying glass from his Pukita tool. I had seen him wield to devastating effect and studied the footprint closely. Size 10, as Giraud noted. The heel, worn on the outer edge, suggests a man who walks with a slight limp, perhaps. But see here, he pointed to a faint ridge in the clay beside the print. This is not natural. It is artificial, as though something was pressed to obscure another mark. I frowned, struggling to follow. "You mean the print was faked?" "Not faked, mon ami, but perhaps enhanced." He rose, dusting his hands. "We shall see. But this print, it is too perfect, too solitary. A murderer who leaves one clear mark and no others. It is not logical." Hotet, who had been watching with growing fascination, cleared his throat. "There is another detail, Monsieur Poirot. Near the grave, we found this." He produced a small evidence bag containing a pocket watch, its glass face shattered, its hands frozen at 2 o'clock. It was in the soil, as though dropped in the struggle. Poirot took the bag, his expression unreadable. He turned the watch over, noting the monogram PR etched on the back. "Monsieur Renaud's, I presume." "We believe so. Bex said. Madame Renaud identified it. She said he always carried it. Poirot opened the bag and examined the watch closely, his magnifying glass glinting in the sunlight. 2 o'clock, he murmured. A precise moment. Yet the doctor places death between midnight and 3. Curious, Nan. He slipped the watch into his pocket, ignoring Totit's raised eyebrow. With your permission, monsieur, I will keep this for now. It may speak to us yet. I was about to ask what he meant when Poirot's attention shifted to the hedge. He pushed through the foliage, disappearing briefly, then emerged holding a small scrap of fabric silk, by the look of it, dyed a deep crimson. He held it to the light, his eyes narrowing. This, messieurs, was caught on a thorn. It is not weathered, not faded. It was placed here recently. He tucked it into an envelope, his movements deliberate. A clue, perhaps, or a distraction. We must be wary of what is too conveniently found. Bex frowned. You think it was planted? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. I think, Monsieur Bex, that a crime is like a play. Every prop has its purpose, but not all are what they seem. Tell me, this tramp of Giroux, what do we know of him? Jodit answered. A vagrant, seen begging near the station. Middle-aged, ragged clothes, with a limp, according to a shopkeeper. Giraud believes he may have sought shelter on the estate and encountered Renaud, perhaps in a robbery gone wrong. Poirot's lips twitched, a sign I knew meant skepticism. A robbery, yet no valuables were taken. Monsieur Renaud's wallet, his rings, they remained on his person. Yes, Hotet admitted, looking uneasy. It is puzzling. Indeed, Poirot said softly. He turned back to the court, his gaze lingering on the grave. One shot, one print, one watch, one scrap of silk. A story, messieurs, but not yet a complete one. We must ask why this court, why this grave, why this man. I felt a stir of frustration. But Poirot, what does it all mean? The footprint. The watch, they point to a struggle. Surely. He looked at me, his eyes twinkling. They point, mon ami, but to what? A struggle. Yes, but perhaps not the one you imagine. The little gray cells, they whisper of order beneath the chaos. We must listen. Chotet, clearly impressed, clapped his hands. Remarkable, Monsieur Poirot. You see what we have missed. Will you join us at the villa? Madame Renaud may have more to share, and we must question the servants further. Poirot agreed, but as we made our way back through the gardens, he lagged behind, his eyes scanning the ground. Near a rosebush, he paused, stooping to retrieve a tiny object, a cigarette stub, its tip stained with lipstick. He held it up, his expression thoughtful. Not a clue for Giraud, I think, he said, slipping it into another envelope, but, for Hercule Poirot, it is suggestive. I stared, bewildered. Lipstick. But who would smoke here, so close to the court? He chuckled. Who, indeed? That is the question, Hastings. Come, let us return to the villa. The tennis court has spoken, but the house, I think, has more to say. As we walked, the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the lawn. The mystery of Paul Renaud's death seemed to deepen with every step, and I felt the weight of Poirot's words. Order beneath chaos. What order could lie in such a brutal act? Only Poirot, with his infuriating calm and relentless logic, could hope to find it. The game, as he would say, was well and truly afoot. Chapter 4. The Widow's Tale. The morning sun had climbed higher, bathing the Villa Genevieve in a warm glow that seemed at odds with the shadow of murder hanging over it. Hercule Poirot and I, Arthur Hastings, returned from the tennis court, with Commissary Bex and Monsieur Hotet, our minds burdened with the enigmatic clues we had uncovered, the solitary footprint, the shattered watch, the crimson silk scrap, and the lipstick-stained cigarette stub. Each seemed a piece of a puzzle, yet their arrangement eluded me. Poirot, however, walked with a brisk step, his eyes alight with that peculiar intensity that signaled his little gray cells were at work. We were ushered into the villa's morning room, a cheerful space with tall windows overlooking the gardens and walls adorned with delicate watercolors. The air was fragrant with the scent of fresh roses, arranged in a crystal vase on a mahogany table, but the atmosphere was heavy with unspoken questions. Madame Eloise Renaud awaited us, seated in a high-backed chair, her black silk dress a stark contrast to the room's brightness. Her face, though pale, was composed, and her dark eyes met ours with a mixture of grief and resolve. Beside her stood a tray with a silver coffee service, untouched, as though she had no heart for such comforts. "Monsieur Poirot," she began, her voice steady but soft, "Monsieur Hotet tells me you have seen the place where my husband was found. I trust you will bring clarity to this nightmare." Poirot bowed, his manner gentle, yet probing. "Madame, I am deeply sensible of your loss. Hercule Poirot seeks only the truth, and with your help, we may uncover it. May we speak of the days before your husband's death? His fears, perhaps, or any unusual events?" She nodded, her fingers smoothing the folds of her dress, a gesture, I thought, to steady herself. "Of course, where shall I begin?" "Perhaps," Poirot suggested, settling into a chair opposite her, "with the night of the intrusion. You mentioned to Monsieur Hotet that masked men entered your bedroom, demanding a secret. This was 2 nights before the murder. Her eyes flickered, and she drew a slow breath. "Yes, it was late past midnight, I believe. Paul and I were asleep when I heard a creak, like a floorboard. Before I could rouse, 2 men were in the room, their faces hidden by scarves. One held a knife, the other a rope. They spoke in low voices, with accents I could not place. Foreign, perhaps, but not distinct. They demanded the secret of Santiago, saying Paul knew its value. I leaned forward, intrigued. "Santiago again," I murmured, glancing at Poirot, who remained impassive. "And your husband's response?" he asked. "Paul was terrified," she said, her voice dropping. "He tried to reason with them, saying he knew nothing of any secret. But they were insistent, tying my hands in his, threatening worse if he did not speak. I begged them to leave us, and then a noise came from below, a servant, perhaps, stirring in the kitchen. The men hesitated, then fled through the window, leaving us bound." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "The window, madame? It was open." "Yes," she replied. "It overlooks the garden, a short drop to the lawn. They must have climbed down. And the bindings," Poirot continued, "they were tight. You could not free yourselves." She hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands. "Not at first. Paul managed to loosen his after some minutes, then freed me. We alerted the servants, but by then, the men were gone. The police were called, but they found no trace, only footprints in the garden. Too muddled to be clear." Jotet nodded. "A clumsy attempt at burglary, we thought, though nothing was stolen. But now, in light of the murder, it seems more sinister." Poirot's fingers tapped lightly on the arm of his chair. "Indeed, monsieur. Madame, these men did they mention Duvon, or any other name?" "No," she said firmly. "Only Santiago. I told Paul to leave Merlinville, to seek safety, but he refused. He said he had sent for you, Monsieur Poirot, and that you would protect him." Her voice broke, and she pressed a handkerchief to her lips. I felt a pang of sympathy, but Poirot's expression remained unreadable. "One moment, madame, if you please. This secret of Santiago, your husband, never spoke of it, even in private." She shook her head. "Never. Paul was guarded about his past. He made his fortune in South America, as I told you, but he seldom spoke of those years. I assumed it was business, nothing more." Poirot nodded, then shifted tack. "And the note found on your husband's body, the mention of Duvon, it means nothing to you?" Her fingers tightened on the handkerchief. "Nothing. I wish I could help, but it is a mystery to me." I watched her closely, sensing a faint tremor in her composure, but Poirot pressed no further. Instead, he rose, his manner courteous. "Merci, madame. Your account is most helpful. May we speak with your son, Jack? His perspective may shed light." Her lips thinned, and for a moment, I thought she would refuse. "Jack is unwell this morning," she said. "The shock has been great, but I will send for him." Bex stepped out to fetch the young man, and while we waited, Poirot paced the room, his eyes roaming over the watercolors, the roses, the silver tray. I knew that look. He was cataloging details, seeking the one out-of-place thread that would unravel the mystery. Hotet, meanwhile, murmured to Bex about Giro's progress, noting that the inspector was now interrogating the tramp spotted in Merlinville. The door opened, and Jack Renaud entered, his appearance a stark contrast to his mother's elegance. His dark hair was disheveled, his shirt creased, and his eyes, though sharp, were shadowed with fatigue. He slumped into a chair, his manner sullen, and fixed Poirot with a wary stare. "You wanted me?" he said, his tone bordering on defiance. Poirot smiled, undeterred. "Monsieur Jack, I am Hercule Poirot, here to uncover the truth of your father's death. You have my sympathies. Tell me, if you will, of your father's mood in recent days. Was he troubled?" Jack shrugged, his fingers drumming on the armrest. "He was always troubled about something business, mostly. He didn't confide in me. We didn't see eye to eye on what matters?" Poirot asked, his voice gentle but insistent. Jack's jaw tightened. "Everything. He wanted me to join his company, to follow his path. I wanted my own life. We argued. That's all." Madame Renaud interjected, her voice sharp. "Jack, you mustn't speak so. Your father loved you." Jack's eyes flashed. "Love? He wanted control, mother? You know that." An awkward silence fell, and I sensed a deeper rift than mere disagreement. Poirot, ever observant, seized the moment. "This argument, Monsieur Jack, when did it occur?" Jack hesitated, then said, "A few days ago. Monday, I think. It was about Marthe." "Marthe?" Poirot's eyebrows lifted. "And who is she?" Jack's cheeks flushed. "Marthe Dalbrol. She lives at the Villa Marguerite, nearby. I want to marry her." Father didn't approve. Madame Renaud's face hardened. "She is not suitable, Jack. Her mother is a woman of questionable reputation." Paul was right to object. Jack sprang to his feet, his fists clenched. "You never gave her a chance." "Marthe is enough," Poirot said quietly, his voice cutting through the tension. "Monsieur Jack, where were you the night your father died?" Jack froze, his anger giving way to caution. "In my room, asleep. I told the police that, and you heard nothing. No shot, no cries. Nothing," Jack said, his voice flat. "Now, if you're done, I have things to do." He strode out, leaving the room in a state of uneasy calm. Madame Renaud sighed, her shoulders sagging. "He is impulsive, Monsieur Poirot, but he loved his father, despite their differences." Poirot nodded, but his eyes were distant, as though chasing a thought. "Merci, madame. You have been most patient. We will trouble you no further for now." As we left the morning room, Chotet and Bex accompanied us to the hall, where Poirot paused, his gaze lingering on a small table. A letter lay there, half hidden beneath a newspaper, its envelope bearing a Chilean postmark. He lifted it with a gloved hand, his expression unreadable. "Monsieur Chotet," he said, "this letter may—" "I examine it." Chotet frowned but nodded. "It arrived yesterday, for Monsieur Renaud. We have not yet opened it, as it seemed unrelated." Poirot slit the envelope with care, revealing a single sheet. He read it silently, then passed it to me. The message was brief, written in a spidery hand. "The shadow moves closer. Douvan will not wait." My pulse quickened. Douvan again, and now a shadow echoes of the telegram Poirot had found in the study. I looked to him, expecting some revelation. But he merely folded the letter, and tucked it away. "A thread, Hastings," he said softly. "One of many. We must weave them carefully." Hotet, growing impatient, suggested we review the servants' statements, but Poirot demurred. "Later, monsieur. For now, I wish to see the Villa Marguerite. This Marthe d'Albrouchy is a piece of the puzzle, I think." Bex agreed to arrange a visit, and as we stepped into the sunlight, I felt the weight of the morning's revelations. Madame Renaud's tale of masked intruders, Jack's defiance. The mysterious letter roll pointed to a web of secrets surrounding Paul Renaud's death. Poirot, I knew, was already tracing its strands, but I could only marvel at the complexity of the task. The widow's tale had raised more questions than answers, and the truth, I feared, was still buried deep. Chapter 5. The mysterious Marthe. The midday sun cast a gentle warmth over Merlinville, as Hercule Poirot and I, Arthur Hastings, made our way from the Villa Genevieve toward the neighboring Villa Marguerite. The path wound through a grove of olive trees, their silver-green leaves rustling in the sea breeze, and the distant murmur of waves lent the scene a deceptive tranquility. My mind, however, was far from calm, churning with the morning's discoveries. Madame Renaud's chilling tale of masked intruders, Jack's heated defense of his beloved Marthe d'Albrouchy, and the cryptic letter from Chile, with its ominous mention of Duvon and a shadow. Each clue seemed to deepen the mystery of Paul Renaud's murder, and I glanced at Poirot, hoping for some hint of his thoughts. As usual, he was inscrutable, his small frame erect, his eyes scanning the path ahead with quiet intensity. "Poirot," I ventured, breaking the silence, "this Marthe d'Albrouchy, what do you expect to learn from her? Jack's attachment seems genuine, but Madame Renaud's disapproval suggests complications." He adjusted his hat, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Complications, mon ami, are the lifeblood of a case. Mademoiselle d'Albrouchy is a thread in our tapestry, perhaps a vibrant one, perhaps a frayed one. We must see her, weave the heart. It often betrays what the mind conceals." I nodded, though his metaphor left me vaguely uneasy. The Villa Marguerite came into view. A charming house smaller than the Genevieve but no less elegant, with ivy-clad walls and a rose garden in full bloom. Its shutters were painted a soft blue, and a stone fountain bubbled merrily in the courtyard. Yet there was an air of reserve about the place, as though it guarded its own secrets. We were met at the door by a maid, a brisk young woman who led us to a shaded veranda where Madame de Breuil and her daughter awaited. Madame de Breuil was a striking figure, perhaps 40, with auburn hair swept into an elegant chignon, and a face that combined beauty with a certain hardness. Her green eyes assessed us coolly, and her silk dress, though simple, was impeccably tailored. Marthe, seated beside her, was a vision of youth barely 20, with golden hair framing a delicate face and eyes of a startling violet hue. Yet there was a tension in her posture, a wariness that belied her beauty, and I sensed she was no mere ingenue. "Monsieur Poirot," Madame d'Albrouchy said, rising with a practiced smile, "we are honored, though I confess I am surprised. The tragedy at the Villa Genevieve has shaken us all, but I hardly see how we can assist." Poirot bowed, his manner courteous, but direct. Mademoiselle, my apologies for intruding on your grief. The death of Monsieur Renaud is a puzzle, and every neighbor, every friend, may hold a piece. May we speak of your acquaintance with the family?" Madame de Breuil gestured for us to sit, her movements graceful, but guarded. Of course, Paul Renaud was a distant acquaintance. We dined occasionally, exchanged pleasantries. His wife Eloise is a woman of refinement, though we are not close. As for Jack, she paused, her eyes flickering to Marthe. He and my daughter have formed an attachment against his father's wishes. Martha's cheeks flushed, and she spoke for the first time, her voice clear, but edged with defiance. "Jack loves me, Monsieur Poirot, His father was cruel to oppose us, but I never wished him harm. Never. Poirot's eyes softened, but his gaze was piercing. Mademoiselle, I do not doubt your sincerity. Tell me, when did you last see Monsieur Renaud? Marthe hesitated, glancing at her mother, who gave a slight nod. A week ago, at a garden party here. He was polite, but cold. He told me to stay away from Jack, said I was not suitable. Her voice trembled, and she looked down, twisting a handkerchief in her hands. Madame Dubrow's lips tightened. Paul Renaud was a man of strong opinions. Monsieur Poirot. He saw my daughter as beneath his son's station, though he knew little of us. I found his attitude tiresome. Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. And his business, madame? Did he ever speak of his affairs? Perhaps of South America? Or a place called Santiago? Madame Dubrow's expression remained serene, but I caught a fleeting tension in her jaw. Never. Our conversations were superficial weather, music, the charms of Merlinville. He was not a man to confide. And you, mademoiselle? Poirot turned to Marthe, his tone gentle. Did Monsieur Renaud mention any fears? Any enemies? Marthe shook her head, her eyes wide. No, nothing. He was always so commanding, so sure of himself. I can't imagine anyone daring to harm him. Poirot leaned back, his gaze shifting between mother and daughter. One final matter, if I may. The name Devon, does it mean anything to either of you? The question hung in the air, and I watched closely. Madame Dubrow's face was a mask, her response immediate. No, it is unfamiliar. Marthe echoed her voice softer, but no less certain. Yet there was something a flicker in Madame Dubrow's eyes, a slight stiffening of her posture that suggested more than she admitted. Poirot rose, his smile polite. Merci, madame, mademoiselle. You have been most helpful. We will not detain you further. As we took our leave, Martha's voice stopped us at the door. Monsieur Poirot, please find who did this. Jack is suffering, and I cannot bear to see him so. Poirot turned, his expression kind but unreadable. Mademoiselle, the truth is my only goal. Rest assured, it will be found. We stepped into the courtyard, the fountain's murmur fading behind us. I waited until we were out of earshot before speaking. Poirot, what do you make of them? Marthe seems devoted to Jack, but her mother, there's something guarded about her. He nodded, his eyes distant. Guarded, yes, mon ami. Madame Dubreuil is a woman who knows the value of silence. And Mademoiselle Marthe, her passion is genuine, but passion can blind as well as bind. Did you notice the handkerchief she held? I frowned, puzzled. Her handkerchief, it was just a bit of lace. Not just lace, Hastings. It was silk, and its color a deep crimson, like the scrap we found in the hedge. A coincidence, perhaps, but Poirot does not trust coincidences. My pulse quickened. You think she was at the tennis court? He raised a hand, cautioning. I think nothing yet. I observe, I collect. The truth, it will emerge when the pieces align. We returned to the Villa Genevieve, where Commissary Bex awaited with news. Inspector Giraud had apprehended the tramp, a bedraggled man named Pierre Lefebvre, and was interrogating him in town. Jotet, eager for progress, urged Poirot to join them, but he declined, preferring to remain at the villa. I wish to speak with the servants, he said, his tone firm. They see what the masters do not. Bex arranged for us to meet Francoise, the maid who had taken our coats the previous evening. She was a sturdy woman of middle age, her face lined but her eyes sharp. We sat in the kitchen, a warm space, smelling of fresh bread, and Poirot questioned her with his usual finesse. Francoise, he began, you have served the Renaults long. 10 years, monsieur, she replied, her voice steady. Since they came to Merlinville, and Monsieur Renaud, was he a good master? She hesitated, her hand smoothing her apron. He paid well, and the work was fair, but he was distant, always in his study, writing letters, burning papers. These last weeks, he was worse, jumpy, like a cat on a hot roof. Poirot leaned forward, and visitors. Did anyone unusual call? Francoise's eyes darted to the door, as though fearing eavesdroppers. There was a woman, monsieur, 3 days ago. She came at dusk, wearing a veiled hat, like in the old novels. I showed her to Madame Renaud in the morning room, but I heard nothing of their talk. A veiled woman, Poirot murmured, his eyes gleaming. And you saw her face? No, monsieur. She kept the veil down, even when she left. But her voice, it was low, cultured, not French, I think. I exchanged a glance with Poirot, my mind racing. A mysterious visitor, so close to the murder, could she'll be linked to do? Poirot pressed further, but Francoise knew little more, only that the woman had left no card and had not returned. As we rose to leave, Poirot's gaze fell on a small basket by the kitchen door, filled with mending. A crimson silk shawl lay atop it, its hue strikingly similar to the scrap from the hedge in Martha's handkerchief. He paused, his fingers brushing the fabric. This shawl, Francoise, whose is it? She glanced at it, unperturbed. Oh, that's Madame's. She tore it on a rose bush last week. Asked me to mend it. Poirot nodded, but I saw the spark in his eyes. Merci, Francoise. You have been most illuminating. Outside, in the villa's quiet corridor, I could contain myself no longer. Poirot, that shawlet's the same color as the scrap, and Martha's handkerchief, could they all be connected? He chuckled softly, adjusting his cuffs. Connected, perhaps, but how? A shawl, a scrap, a handkerchief red is a common color, none. Yet 3 in such proximity. It is suggestive. We must tread carefully, Hastings. The web is delicate, and our spider is watchful. Bex joined us, reporting that Giraud's interrogation of the tramp had yielded nothing, no boots matching the footprint, no motive, only a vague alibi of sleeping in a barn. Giraud, undeterred, was now scouring Renaud's business records. Convinced of a financial motive, Poirot listened politely, then said, Monsieur Bex, I would see Monsieur Renaud's study again. There is a detail I wish to confirm. We returned to the oak-paneled room, its air heavy with the scent of old leather and ink. Poirot moved to the desk, his eyes scanning the papers we had seen before. He paused at a small notebook, its pages filled with cryptic figures and initials. One entry caught his attention, de Santiago, 1 OK. He slipped the notebook into his pocket, his expression unreadable. Another thread, Hastings, he said as we left the study. Santiago, Duvan, a veiled woman, a crimson thread. The pattern forms, but slowly. Let us return to our hotel. I must think. As we walked back through Merlinville's sunlit streets, I felt the mystery tightening around us. Martha's intensity, Madame Dubrul's evasiveness, the veiled visitor, all pointed to a truth just out of reach. Poirot, I knew, was already piecing it together, his mind a labyrinth of logic where I could only stumble. The game was growing darker, and I could only hope we would find the light before it was too late. Chapter 6. The shadow of Duvain's afternoon sunbathed Merlinville in a golden haze as Hercule Poirot and I, Arthur Hastings, returned to our hotel, the weight of the morning's discoveries pressing upon us. The visit to the villa, Marguerite, had left me unsettled. Marred Daubrul's fervent defense of her love for Jack Renaud, her mother's cool reticence, and the crimson silk connections weaving through the case were like threads in a tapestry I could not yet discern. Poirot, as ever, seemed unperturbed, his small frame moving with purposeful energy, his eyes glinting with the quiet satisfaction of a man who senses the puzzle's edges coming into view. We settled in the hotel's modest lounge, a quiet room, with wicker chairs and a view of the sea, to review our findings. I spread my notebook on the table, eager to organize the chaos of clues, the footprint, the shattered watch, the crimson silk scrap, the cigarette stub, the veiled visitor, and the cryptic references to Duvin and Santiago. Poirot ordered a tisane, his one concession to the day's warmth, and leaned back, his fingers steepled. Poirot, I began. This Duvin, it's everywhere. The note in Renaud's pocket, the letter from Chile, now the notebook entry. Is it a person, a place, a code? And how does it tie to Santiago? He sipped his tisane, his gaze distant. Duvin mon ami, is the shadow in our story, the shape that moves but never fully reveals itself. I have a suspicion, but it requires confirmation. Tell me, Hastings, what do you recall of Paul Renaud's past? I frowned, piecing together fragments. He made his fortune in South America, likely Chile, given the Santiago references. Madame Renaud said it was land deals, but she was vague. Could Duvin be a business rival from those days? Poirot's lips twitched, a sign I was on the wrong track. A rival, perhaps, but not in the way you think. This morning, while you were shaving, I made a small inquiry with an old friend at the Screet. The name Duvin has surfaced before, not as a place or a code, but as a woman, a notorious adventuress known in Buenos Aires and Santiago some 20 years ago. She was a blackmailer, a swindler, a chameleon who vanished when her schemes grew too hot. My jaw dropped. A woman, but could she still be active? And why would Renaud fear her now? Poirot raised a hand, cautioning. We do not yet know if our Duvin is hers, but the coincidence is suggestive. Renaud's wealth, it seems, was not all from honest toil. The notebook entry to Santiago, 10K, suggests a payment, perhaps to silence a past sin. We must dig deeper. I nodded, my mind racing. A blackmailer from Renaud's past, it fit the pattern of fear in his letter to Poirot, the urgency of his summons. But how did it connect to the murder on the tennis court? Before I could press further, Commissary Bex arrived, his face flushed. With news. Monsieur Poirot, he said, Giraud has released the tramp, Pierre Lefebvre. No evidence links him to the crime, his boots don't match the footprint, and he was seen in a tavern miles away at midnight. Giraud is furious, but he's now chasing a new lead, a telegram sent to Renaud the day before his death. Poirot's eyes sharpened. A telegram. Its contents, Monsieur Bex. Bex produced a copy, handing it to Poirot. It was sent from Paris, addressed to Renaud at the villa. Here, see for yourself. Poirot read aloud. Beware the shadow. Trust no one. He folded the paper, his expression thoughtful. This shadow again. It echoes the Chilean letter. Nan. And the timing sent the day before the murder, yet received too late to save him. Who sent it, and why? Bex shrugged. Chiro's tracing the sender, but Paris is a labyrinth. He thinks it's a rival financier, someone Renaud crossed. In business. Poirot's smile was polite, but skeptical. Giraud sees money where I see motive. Mercy, Monsieur Bex. This telegram, it is another thread. May I keep this copy? Bex nodded, and as he departed, Poirot turned to me, his voice low. Hastings, we must return to the villa. The servants, they see more than they say. And that veiled woman, Frank Wise, mentioned she is a ghost we must catch. We arrived at the villa, Genevieve, as the afternoon waned. The house quieter now, its grandeur tinged with mourning. Francoise, the maid, was summoned to the library, a book room where Poirot's presence seemed to sharpen the air. She stood before us, her apron crisp, her eyes wary but not hostile. Francoise. Poirot began, his tone soothing. You spoke of a veiled woman visiting Madame Renaud. Can you recall anything more? Her height, her manner, perhaps a scent? Fran pursed her lips, thinking she was tall, monsieur, like Madame, but slimmer. Her walk was quick, nervous-like. There was a smell, perfume, strong, with a hint of jasmine. I noticed it when she passed me in the hall. Poirot nodded, his eyes gleaming, and her voice, you said it was cultured, not French. Could it have been South American? Perhaps. Francoise's brow furrowed. South American? I couldn't say, monsieur. It was soft, but sharp, like she was used to giving orders. Merci. One last thing, the crimson shawl you mend for Madame. Has it been worn recently? Before the tear? She shook her head. Not that I know, monsieur. Madame hasn't worn it since last summer. It's been in her wardrobe, till the rosebush caught it. Poirot dismissed her with a smile, but as the door closed, his expression grew grave. Jasmine perfume, a cultured voice, a tall figure. This veiled woman, Hastings, she is no stranger to the Reynolds, I think, and the Cholet's absence from use is curious, given our crimson scrap. I frowned, struggling to keep pace. You think the shawl was taken from Madame Reynolds' wardrobe to plant that scrap? But why? To mislead, he said simply. A false trail, to point us elsewhere. But where, and by whom? We must speak with the butler, Henry. He oversees the household. He will know of visitors, of habits. Henry, a stooped man with a lined face and a deferential air, was found polishing silver in the dining room. Poirot questioned him with the same gentle precision, asking about unusual callers, deliveries, or changes in the household routine. Henry's answers were measured, but one detail caught Poirot's attention: a parcel, delivered 2 days before. The murder, addressed to Renaud, but signed for by Madame Renaud. A parcel. Poirot's voice was sharp. Its contents, Henry Watworthy. The butler shook his head. I never saw, monsieur. Madame took it to the study herself. It was small, wrapped in brown paper. No mark but the address. Poirot's eyes narrowed, and Madame, her manner, when she took it, calm/monsieur, but hurried. She said it was a gift for monsieur, to be opened later. I exchanged a glance with Poirot, my pulse quickening. A parcel, delivered so close to the murder, could it hold the key to Duveen's shadow? Poirot thanked Henry, and led me back to the study, where he examined the desk with renewed focus. The safe, still ajar from the police's search, drew his attention. He knelt, peering inside, and emerged with a small key, its head engraved with a tiny D. A key, Hastings, he said, holding it to the light. Not for the safe, I think, but for something smaller, a box, perhaps, or a drawer. And this D, is it for Duveen, or mere chance? I stared, bewildered. A key. But what does it unlock? And where is the box? Poirot slipped the key into his pocket, his smile enigmatic. Patience, mon ami. The box will find us, or we will find it. For now, we have another task. This parcel, Madame Renaud did not mention it. Why? We sought her in the morning room, where she sat alone, a book unopened in her lap. Her face, pale but composed, betrayed no surprise at our return, though her eyes flickered with unease as Poirot spoke. Madame, he began, a small matter. A parcel arrived for your husband 2 days before his death. You signed for it, took it to the study, yet you did not mention this. May I ask why? Her fingers tightened on the book, and for a moment I thought she would deny it. Then she sighed, her voice low. It was a trifle, Monsieur Poirot, a book, a gift from a friend in Paris. Paul was fond of history. I saw no need to mention it. A book, Poirot repeated, his tone neutral. May we see it? She rose, her movements stiff, and led us to the study. From a shelf, she produced a slim volume on Chilean architecture, its pages crisp and unturned. Poirot flipped through it, his eyes scanning for hidden notes or marks, but found nothing. He handed it back, his expression unreadable. Mercy, Madame, you are most kind. As we left the villa, I could contain my frustration no longer. Poirot, that book, it's nothing. Why would she hide it? And this key, the parcel, what does it all mean? He chuckled, adjusting his hat against the sun. Nothing, you say? No, Hastings. It is everything. The book is a lie, or half a lie, Madame. Renaud conceals its true nature. The parcel, the key, the veiled woman, they are links to Duveen's shadow. We must follow them, to Santiago and beyond. We returned to the hotel as dusk fell, the sea a shimmering expanse under the fading light. The mystery of Paul Renaud's death was growing ever more intricate, with Duveen's shadow looming larger. Poirot, I knew, was closing in, his mind a crucible where clues were forged into truth. I could only follow, marveling at the labyrinth. We navigated, and praying we would emerge before the shadow struck again. Chapter 7. The telegram's timing. The evening shadows lengthened over Millionaire, casting a soft veil across the town's elegant villas and quiet streets. Hercule Poirot and I, Arthur Hastings, sat in the lounge of our modest hotel. The sea's distant murmur, a faint backdrop to our discussion. The day's revelations weighed heavily. The veiled woman, the crimson shawl, the mysterious parcel, and the small key marked with a D had deepened the enigma of Paul Renaud's murder. Above all, the specter of Duveen, a name tied to a shadowy adventuress from Renaud's South American past, loomed larger, its significance tantalizingly out of reach. Poirot, sipping a fresh tisane, seemed invigorated, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the chase. Hastings, he said, setting down his cup, we are at a crossroads. The clues, multiply footprint, watch, silk, key, but they are like stars in a constellation. We must find the pattern. This telegram, the one Bex showed us, it is a pivot, I think. Its timing troubles me. I pulled out my notebook, flipping to the telegram's text. Beware the shadow, trust no one. Sent from Paris the day before Renaud's death. It had arrived too late to warn him. It's cryptic, Poirot, I said, but why the focus on its timing? Surely, the message itself. Shadow again, like the Chilean letterers. The key. He leaned forward, his voice low. The message, yes, but the when is equally vital. Why send a warning from Paris, only for it to arrive after the deed? Was it meant to fail, or was it sent by one who did not know Renaud was already marked? We must trace its origin. I nodded, though my mind struggled to keep pace. Working on that, isn't he? Bex said he's chasing the sender in Paris. Poirot's lips twitched with disdain. Giraud chases shadows while missing the light. His method, he sees a telegram and thinks only of bank accounts, not motives. We, Hastings, will look deeper. But first, we return to the villa. There is a question I must ask, Madame Renaud, one she may not wish to answer. The Villa Genevieve was hushed as we arrived, its grandeur softened by the twilight. A servant led us to the drawing room, where Madame Eloise Renaud sat alone, a black shawl draped over her shoulders. Her face, illuminated by a single lamp, was pale but resolute, and her dark eyes met Poirot's with a flicker of apprehension. Monsieur Poirot, she said, rising, you are tireless. Have you news? Progress, madame, he replied, his tone courteous but firm, but not yet answers. I have a question, if I may. The telegram your husband received, the one warning of a shadow, did he speak of it to you? Or of any other messages from Paris? Her fingers tightened on the shawl, and for a moment I thought she would evade. A telegram, she said, her voice steady. Paul received many messages, business matters, mostly. I recall none about a shadow. Why do you ask? Poirot's eyes never left her face. Because, madame, its timing is curious. Sent the day before his death, yet arriving too late, and its words echo a letter we found, one mentioning Duveen. You are certain? You know nothing of this? Her gaze faltered, and she turned slightly, as though to shield herself from scrutiny. Duveen again. I have told you, monsieur, the name means nothing. As for telegrams, Paul handled his correspondence privately. I was not privy to every detail. I watched her closely, sensing a crack in her composure. Poirot, however, pressed no further, his smile polite. Mercy, madame. One other matter, the parcel you took to the study, the book. Have you recalled anything more about its sender? Her lips thinned. It was a friend, as I said, a Monsieur Dubois, from Paris. I know little more. Poirot nodded, but I saw the spark in his eyes. You are most kind, madame. We will trouble you no further tonight. As we left the drawing room, I whispered Poirot, she's hiding something. That hesitation about the telegram and this Dubois, it sounds like another invention. He chuckled softly, adjusting his gloves. Hiding, yes, mon ami, but not all. Madame Renaud is a fortress, but every fortress has a gate. This Dubois, will find him, or his shadow. For now, we seek another voice. He led me to the servants' quarters, where Henry, the butler, was polishing a candelabrum in the pantry. His lined face betrayed no surprise at our arrival, though his eyes were cautious. Poirot, with his usual finesse, eased into the conversation. Henry, he began, you are the eyes of this house, Nan. Tell me, the day before Monsieur Renaud's death, did any message arrive, perhaps a telegram, that caused him concern? Henry set down the candelabrum, his hands steady. A telegram, monsieur. Yes, I recall one. It came in the afternoon, from Paris. I gave it to monsieur in his study. He read it, then burned it, in the fireplace. His face, it was pale, like he'd seen a ghost. My pulse quickened. Burned it. Did you see the words, Henry? He shook his head. No, monsieur. But monsieur was troubled after. He locked the study door and stayed there till dinner. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And madame, did she see this telegram? Not that I know, monsieur. She was in the garden with Mademoiselle Marthe that afternoon. I glanced at Poirot, startled. Marthe d'Aubreuil was here. Henry nodded. Yes, with young Monsieur Jack. They were in the rose arbor, talking. Madame joined them for a time. Poirot thanked Henry and led me outside, where the night air was cool and scented with jasmine. Marthe, here, on the day of the telegram, I said, my mind racing. Could she have seen it, or sent it? Possible, Hastings, but unlikely, Poirot replied, his voice low. The telegram's origin is Paris, and Marthe was in Merledville? No, the sender is another player, one who knows of shadows in Douvan, but Marthe's presence, it suggests she is more entangled than we thought. We returned to the hotel, where a message from Commissary Bex awaited. Giraud had traced the telegram to a Paris post office, but the sender had used a false name, Jean Dubois. The coincidence with Madame Renaud's friend was striking, and I saw Poirot's eyes narrow. Dubois, he murmured, a name too convenient. Giraud will chase this phantom, but we, Hastings, will look closer. Tomorrow, we question Jack Renaud again. His alibi, his anger, they hide something. The next morning, we found Jack at the villa, pacing the terrace with a cigarette in hand. His face was haggard, his eyes red-rimmed, and he greeted us with barely concealed irritation. What? Now, Poirot, he snapped. Haven't you badgered us enough? Poirot's smile was unruffled. Monsieur Jack, I seek only clarity. Your alibi the night of your father's death. You were in your room, asleep, yet no one saw you after dinner. Can anyone confirm this? Jack's jaw tightened. I told. You? I was asleep. What do you want? A witness to my dreams? Poirot's gaze was steady. I want the truth, monsieur. You argued with your father about Mademoiselle Marthe. Was there more? A secret, perhaps, that led you elsewhere that night? Jack's cigarette fell to the ground, and for a moment, I thought he would bolt. Then he slumped, his voice low. Right? I wasn't in my room. I went to Paris, to see a friend. I took the late train, got back at dawn. I didn't want to say it looks bad, doesn't it? I stared, stunned. Paris? Why didn't you tell the police? Because I knew they'd suspect me, he burst out. Father and I fought. Yes, but I didn't kill him. I swear it. Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. This friend, monsieur, who is he? Jack hesitated, then muttered, a fellow named Lucien Morel. He's gambler, not the sort father approved of. I owed him money, needed to settle it. Poirot nodded, but I saw the calculation in his gaze. Merci, Monsieur Jack. We will verify this. For now, tell no one of our talk. As we left the terrace, I turned to Poirot, my mind reeling. Paris, Poirot. If Jack was gone, he has no alibi. Could he? Do not leap, Hastings, he cautioned, his tone sharp. Jack's story is convenient, yes, but also inconvenient. A gambler friend, a secret trip. It smells of truth, but perhaps not all of it. We must find this Lucien Morel, and we must learn why Madame Renaud lied about the parcel, why the telegram was burned. Back at the hotel, Poirot wired a contact in Paris to investigate Morel and the telegram's sender. As he sealed the message, he murmured, the timing, Hastings, it is the key. The telegram, the parcel, Jack's absence, they converge on the night of death. Duvine's shadow is close, but we must shine a light to see its face. The day ended with the sea aglow under a crimson sunset, a mirror to the silk threads weaving through our case. Jack's revelation had cracked open a new door, but the truth remained elusive, hidden in the interplay of shadows and lies. Poirot, I knew, was closing in, his mind a beacon in the fog. I could only follow, hoping the light would break before the darkness claimed another victim. Chapter 8. The Veiled Woman. The morning light filtered through Merlinville's sea-misted air, casting a delicate glow over the town, as Hercule Poirot and I, Arthur Hastings, set out once more for the Villa Genevieve. The revelations of the previous day, Jack Renaud's clandestine trip to Paris, the burned telegram, and the elusive Dubois linked to both Madame Renaud's parcel and the warning from Paris had tightened the web of mystery surrounding Paul Renaud's murder. Each clue, from the crimson silk to the shadowy divan, seemed to point to a deeper truth, yet the pattern remained just beyond my grasp. Poirot, however, moved with a quiet assurance, his eyes bright with the certainty of a man who senses the puzzle's heart. We had scarcely finished our breakfast when a message arrived from Commissary Bex, urging us to the villa. Inspector Giraud, it seemed, had uncovered a new little witness who claimed to have seen a woman near the tennis court on the night of the murder. Poirot's interest was piqued, and as we walked through Merlinville's sunlit streets, he murmured, a woman, Hastings. Perhaps our veiled visitor, or another player in this drama. We must tread softly, the truth is near, but it is fragile. At the villa, we were met by Bex and Monsieur Hotet in the hall, their faces a study in contrasting emotions, Bex's cautious optimism and Hotet's eager anticipation. Giraud, predictably, was present, his slick hair and smug expression as irritating as ever. He stood by the fireplace, a notebook in hand, and greeted Poirot with a sneer. Monsieur Poirot, he said, you'll be pleased to know I've done your work for you. A witness, a hotel maid, saw a woman skulking near the Renaud estate that night. Tall, well-dressed, wearing a veiled hat. Sound familiar? Poirot's smile was polite, but edged with irony. Most intriguing, Monsieur Giroux. A veiled woman, you say? And you believe she is the key to the case? Giraud snapped. Likely a mistress or a spy for a rival financier. I'm tracing her movements now. No need for your little gray cells this time. I bristled at his arrogance, but Poirot merely inclined his head. I look forward to your success, monsieur. May we speak with this maid? Hotet nodded, summoning a young woman named Claire, who entered nervously, her hands twisting in her apron. She was slight, with mousy hair and wide eyes, and her voice trembled as she spoke. Monsieur, she began, addressing Hotet. It was late, near midnight, I think. I was walking home from the hotel, along the lane by the Renaud estate. I saw her, lady, tall, in a dark coat and a hat with a veil, like in the pictures. She was near the gate, looking toward the tennis court. Poirot leaned forward, his tone gentle. "Claire, this is most helpful. The lady, did she move, speak, perhaps drop something?" Claire shook her head. She just stood there, watching. I didn't linger, it felt wrong, her being there so late. But I saw a glow, like she lit a cigarette, and then I hurried on. My pulse quickened, recalling the lipstick-stained cigarette stub Poirot had found near the court. "A cigarette," I murmured, glancing at him. His eyes gleamed, but he pressed on. And her manner, Claire, was she nervous, hurried? "A bit, monsieur," Claire replied. She kept looking over her shoulder, like she expected someone. Poirot thanked her, and as she left, Poirot crowed, "There, a suspect, clear as day. I'll have her identity by tomorrow. Poirot, you can go back to your theories." Poirot's smile was serene. "I wish you luck, Monsieur Giraud. But permit me a small suggestion: the cigarette. It may tell you more than you think." Giraud scoffed, but Hotet, ever diplomatic, ushered him out to pursue his inquiries. Alone with Bex, Poirot turned to me, his voice low. "The cigarette? Hastings, it links our veiled woman to the court. Jasmine perfume, a cultured voice, now a cigarette with lipstick. The pieces align, but we need more." Bex, sensing Poirot's focus, offered to arrange another interview with Madame Renaud. We found her in the morning room, seated by a window, her black dress stark against the sunlight. Her face was composed, but her hands betrayed her, clenching a lace handkerchief as we entered. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice weary, "you returned so soon. Have you found the monster who took my husband?" "Not yet," Madame Poirot replied, settling into a chair, "but we are close. A witness has seen a woman near the tennis court that night, a tall lady veiled, smoking a cigarette. You recall no such visitor?" Her eyes widened, and for a moment I thought she would faint. "A woman? No, I know of no one. The servants would have told me." Poirot's gaze was steady. "Perhaps, madame, it was you. The veiled woman who visited 3 days ago, described by Francois, was tall, with a cultured voice, jasmine perfume. And now, a similar figure at the scene of the crime. Can you explain this?" The room grew still, the only sound the distant tick of a clock. Madame Renaud's face drained of color, and her handkerchief fell to the floor. "Me," she whispered. "You think I'd Monsieur Poirot? I was in my bed, grieving for Paul's fears. I swear it." I watched, stunned, as Poirot pressed forward, his voice soft but relentless. "Madame, the parcel you took to the study, the telegram your husband burned. Now this veiled woman, too many secrets surround you. Tell me the truth. Who was she, and what did she want?" Her composure shattered, and she sank back, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Very well," she said, her voice breaking. "The veiled woman, it was me. I went to meet someone that day, someone from Paul's past. A man, Gabriel Stoner. He was my lover, years ago, before I met Paul. He came to Merlinville, demanding money, threatening to expose our affair. I met him in secret, wearing a veil to avoid recognition. I stared, my mind reeling. A lover, could this Stoner be linked?" To Duvon Poirot's expression remained calm, but his eyes were alight with calculation. "And this meeting, Madame, where did it take place?" "At the hotel, in a private room," she said, her voice barely audible. "I gave him what I could, a few jewels, some cash. He promised to leave, but I feared he would return. I told no one, not even Paul." "And the night of the murder?" Poirot asked. "You were not near the tennis court." "No," she cried. "I was here, in my room. I swear it, Monsieur Poirot. I loved Paul, despite everything." Poirot rose, his manner gentle. "Merci, madame. Your candor is a step toward the truth. We will speak of this Stoner. For now, rest." As we left the room, I turned to Poirot, my voice urgent. Stoner, blackmailer. Could he be the killer, or is he Duvin? Poirot shook his head, leading me to the garden for privacy. Not Duvin, I think, but a piece of the puzzle. Madame Renaud's confession explains the veiled woman, but not the cigarette at the court. Her story is true, yet incomplete. We must find Stoner and quickly. Bex, who had waited in the hall, joined us, and Poirot requested a search for Gabriel Stoner, describing him as an Englishman, likely in his 40s, with a history of shady dealings. Bex promised to wire Paris and Calais, where such a man might hide. As he departed, Poirot drew me to the study, his eyes scanning the desk once more. Hastings, he said, producing the small key with the D from his pocket. This key haunts me. It is not for the safe, not for a drawer, but Madame Renaud's confession suggests another possibility, a jewel box, perhaps, where she kept the gems for Stoner. We searched the study, then Madame Renaud's bedroom, with her reluctant permission. In a locked vanity, hidden behind a false panel, we found a small rosewood box, its lock matching the key. Inside was a single item, a photograph of a woman, strikingly beautiful, with violet eyes and golden hair, annotated in Paul Renaud's hand, Amor Santiago, 1905. I gasped. Marthe Dalbrul. But why is her picture here, from 20 years ago? Poirot's face was grim. Not Marthe Hastings, but one who resembles her, perhaps, her mother, Madame Dubrel, in her youth. This photograph, hidden away, suggests a connection to Renaud's past, to Santiago, and Amor. It is a motive, Nan. My mind reeled. Madame Dubrel and Renaud, an affair, perhaps, Poirot said, slipping the photograph into his pocket. Or a deception. We must confront her, but first, Stoner. He is the shadow's edge, and we must see his face. As we left the villa, the sun dipped low, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold. Madame Renaud's confession had cracked the case wide open. Yet new questions swirled Stoner's role, the photograph's secret, and the veiled woman's true purpose. Poirot, I knew, was weaving these threads into a net, his mind a beacon. In the gathering dusk, the truth was close, but its shadow was closer still, and I felt a chill as we stepped into the fading light. Chapter 9. The False Trail. The twilight air of Merlinville carried a cool edge as Hercule Poirot and I, Arthur Hastings, made our way back to our hotel, the revelations of the day swirling like mist in my mind. Madame Eloise Renaud's confession that she was the veiled woman, meeting her former lover Gabriel Stoner, in a desperate bid to fend off his blackmail, had shaken the foundations of the case. The discovery of the photograph, a youthful image of a woman resembling Madame Dubrul, annotated with Amor, Santiago, 1905, and hidden in a locked box, had only deepened the enigma. Was Madame Dubrul tied to Paul Renaud's past? Perhaps as the mysterious Duvin? Where did Stoner fit in this tangle of secrets? Poirot, as ever, seemed undaunted, his small frame moving with purpose. His eyes alight with the quiet fire of deduction. We settled in the hotel's lounge, its wicker chairs and sea view windows now familiar, to plan our next move. Poirot ordered a coffee, black and strong, a rare departure from his usual tisane, signaling the intensity of his focus. I spread my notebook before me, its pages crowded with notes on footprints, telegrams, crimson silk, and now blackmail, and hidden photographs. The case felt like a labyrinth, each turn revealing a new wall. Poirot, I began, this photograph fits a bombshell. If Madame Dubrul was Renaud's lover in Santiago, could she be Dupin, and Stoner is he, her accomplice, or a rival blackmailer? Poirot sipped his coffee, his gaze distant. A bombshell, yes, mon ami, but not yet detonated. The photograph suggests a connection, but we must not leap. Madame Dubrul's youth matches the time frame of Duvin's exploits. Yet her composure at the Villa Marguerite betrays no guilt. As for Stoner, He is a shadow within a shadow, a man who demands jewels but does not kill, at least not yet. We need him found. I nodded, though my mind raced. And Jack's Paris trip due. We believe his story about this Lucien Morel. It's awfully convenient, being away the night of the murder. Poirot's lips twitched. Convenient or inconvenient, depending on the truth. Jack's confession smells of fear, not deception. But we await word from Paris on Morel. For now, we must test another thread, the veiled woman. Madame Renaud's story fits, but the cigarette stub at the tennis court does not. Why would she smoke there, risking discovery? Before I could respond, Commissary Bex arrived, his face a mixture of excitement and frustration. Monsieur Poirot, he said, we've had a breakthrough. A woman matching the veiled lady's description was seen in Paris yesterday, at a café near the Gare du Nord. Giraud's men are closing in. She used the name Madame Duvon. My heart skipped. Duvon Poirot. She's real, and she's here. Poirot's eyes narrowed, but his voice was calm. Most interesting, Monsieur Bex. This woman, what do we know of her? Bex produced a telegram from Giraud. Tall, elegant, about 40, with a foreign accent, South American, the waiter thought. She met a man, described as English, possibly stoner. Giraud's convinced she's our killer, or at least an accomplice. Poirot read the telegram, his expression unreadable. Giraud is thorough, but hasty. A woman named Duvon, meeting an Englishman, it is too perfect. None. I wish to see this café, this waiter. Arrange it, Monsieur Bex, for tomorrow. And stoner any trace? Bex shook his head. Not yet. Calais and Paris are being searched, but he's slippery. We've wired descriptions to every port. Poirot thanked him, and as Bex departed, he turned to me, his voice low. A false trail. Hastings. This Madame Duvon in Paris, it is a lure, designed to distract. But by whom, and why? I frowned, puzzled. You think it's a setup? But Giraud's witnesses see what they are meant to see, he interrupted, his tone sharp. A woman calls herself Duvon, meets a man in public, it is theatrical, not subtle. The true Duvon, if she exists, would not be so careless. We must act, but with eyes open. Determined to test his theory, Poirot proposed a stratagem. We will let it be known that Hercule Poirot seeks Duvon in Paris, he said. A whisper to Giraud, a hint to the press. If this is a trap, the trapper will move, and we will see their hand. I was skeptical, but agreed, and Poirot drafted a brief message to Giraud, suggesting he publicize the hunt for Madame Duvon in Paris, citing Poirot's interest. By evening, the local papers carried a small item. Belgian detective pursues mysterious Duvon in Renaud murder case. I felt a thrill of anticipation, though Poirot's calm unnerved me. The next morning, we took the early train to Paris, a journey of jostling carriages and gray skies. The Gare du Nord bustled with travelers, and we made our way to the Café Étoile, a modest establishment near the station. The waiter, a wiry man named Marcel, confirmed Giraud's report. A tall woman, veiled, with a lilting accent, had met an Englishman 2 days prior. She had called herself Madame Duvon when paying, a detail Marcel found odd, and her companion, Poirot asked, his eyes keen. English, monsieur, Marcel said. Fair hair, sharp features, about 40. He seemed nervous, kept checking his watch. They spoke in low voices, something about Santiago and the plan. I couldn't hear more. I exchanged a glance with Poirot. Santiago again. And the woman, Poirot, pressed, her perfume, her manner. Jasmine, monsieur, strong but pleasant. She was poised like a lady, but her hands shook when she lit her cigarette. Poirot nodded, slipping Marcel a coin. As we left the café, he murmured, Jasmine, cigarettes, Santiago a perfect match for our veiled woman. 2 perfect Hastings. This is no coincidence. It is a performance. Back at the station, Poirot wired Bex to confirm the woman's sighting, but urged discretion. "We have stirred the nest," he said as we boarded the return train. "Now, we watch." By evening, we were back in Merlinville, where a new development awaited. Bex met us at the hotel, his face grim. "Monsieur Poirot, your ploy worked too well. A woman was spotted in Merlinville this afternoon, matching the Paris description. She was seen near the villa, asking about you. But when the gendarmes approached, she vanished." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Vanished? Or was never there? Describe her, Monsieur Bex." "Tall, veiled, foreign accent," Bex said. "A shopkeeper heard her inquire about the Belgian detective. Giros, furious he thinks you've scared off his lead." Poirot chuckled, unperturbed. "Giraud chases a mirage, and I have set it running. This woman, Hastings she, is a decoy, hired to draw us from the truth. The real Duvon is closer, hidden in plain sight." I stared, bewildered. "A decoy? But who would hire her?" "Stoner, Madame d'Aubry, or another," Poirot said, his voice soft. "We must return to the villa." Madame Renaud's confession was a beginning, but her silence on the cigarette stub troubles me. And Jack, his Paris alibi must be tested. At the Villa Genevieve, we found Madame Renaud in the library, her face drawn but composed. Poirot wasted no time. "Madame," he said, "the veiled woman in Paris, calling herself Duvinci, is not you, yet she mimics your movements. And the cigarette stub, at the tennis court lipstick, jasmine. You smoke, perhaps?" Her eyes widened, and she shook her head vehemently. "No, Monsieur Poirot, I do not smoke. And this woman in Paris, I know nothing of her. You must believe me." Poirot's gaze was relentless. "Then let us speak of the night of the intrusion, the masked men demanding Santiago. You said they bound you, yet the police found your bindings loose, easily slipped. Why, madame?" Her hands trembled, and she sank into a chair. I was frightened, confused. Perhaps I loosened them myself, in panic. "I swear, I told you the truth about Stoner." Poirot nodded, but his eyes were hard. "We shall see, madame. For now, I ask you to trust Hercule Poirot. The truth is near." As we left, I turned to him, my voice urgent. "Poirot, you suspect her, don't you? The loose bindings, the cigarettes, hiding more." He sighed, adjusting his hat. "Hiding, yes, but not all. The bindings suggest complicity, but the cigarette does not fit. She is a piece, not the whole. We must find Stoner, and we must revisit Madame d'Aubry. The photograph Amour, Santiago, it is a key, but to what lock?" That night, a telegram arrived from Poirot's Paris contact. Lucien Morel, Jack's gambler friend, confirmed Jack's visit on the night of the murder. Though he noted, Jack seemed agitated, paying a debt in haste. Stoner, however, remained elusive, last seen in Calais. As I read the message, Poirot murmured, "The false trail narrows, Hastings, the decoy runs, but the true shadow waits. Tomorrow, we tighten the net." The stars glittered over Merlin, their light cold and distant. The case was a maze of mirrors, reflecting lies and half-truths. Poirot, I knew, was close to shattering the illusion, his mind a blade, cutting through the fog. I could only follow, hoping the false trail would lead us to the heart of the mystery before the shadow struck again. Chapter 10. The Lover's Secret. The morning sun rose over Merlinville with a deceptive calm, its rays gilding the sea and softening the stark reality of Paul Renaud's murder. Hercule Poirot and I, Arthur Hastings, sat in our hotel's lounge, the air heavy with the weight of our investigation. The false trail of the veiled Madame Duvon in Paris had confirmed Poirot's suspicions of a deliberate distraction, while Madame Eloise Renaud's confession about her blackmailing former lover, Gabriel Stoner, had opened a new avenue. The photograph of a woman resembling a youthful Madame du Breul marked Amour Santiago, 1905, hinted at a tangled past, but the precise role of Douvan remained elusive. Poirot, sipping his customary tisane, was a study in focus, his eyes gleaming with the intensity of a man closing in on his quarry. "Hastings," he said, setting down his cup, "we are at the precipice. The thread Stoner, the photograph, the loose bindings, they converge, but the heart of the matter is still veiled. Today, we find Gabriel Stoner. He is the key to unlocking Madame Renaud's secrets, and perhaps those of Santiago." I nodded, my notebook open before me, its pages a chaotic map of clues. The footprint, the shattered watch, the crimson silk, the cigarette stub, and now the blackmailer Stoner. "Poirot," I ventured, "if Stoner is in Calais, as your contact suggested, he could be the Englishman seen with the fake Douvan. But why the charade? And how does Madame Dubrow fit?" Poirot's lips twitched, a sign of amusement at my impatience. "The charade, mon ami, is too confused to draw our eyes from the true As for Madame Dubrow, the photograph suggests a history with Renaud, but her role lover, accomplice, or victim is unclear. We must tread carefully, for the spider of this web is watchful." A message from Commissary Bex interrupted us, confirming that Gabriel Stoner had been located in Calais, staying at a discreet hotel under an alias. Bex had arranged for local police to detain him, and we were to meet them by noon. Poirot's eyes sparkled with anticipation, and we hastened to the station, boarding a train that rattled through the French countryside, its rhythm a counterpoint. To my racing thoughts, Calais greeted us with a bustle of port activity, the air sharp with salt and the cries of gulls. At the Hotel des Vagues, a nondescript building near the docks, we were met by a local inspector, Monsieur Dubois, who led us to a private room where Stoner awaited. He was a lean man in his mid-40s, with fair hair thinning at the temples, and a face that combined charm with a predatory edge. His gray suit was well cut but worn, and his blue eyes darted between us, assessing Monsieur Poirot. He said, his English accent clipped, "I've heard of you. What's this about? I've done nothing wrong." Poirot settled into a chair, his manner deceptively mild. "Monsieur Stoner, let us dispense with games. You came to Merlinville to blackmail Madame Eloise Renaud, threatening to expose an old affair. She paid you Jules cash, yet you lingered, meeting a woman in Paris who called herself Douvan. Why?" Stoner's composure faltered, his fingers drumming on the table. "Blackmail. That's a strong word. Poirot, Eloise and I, we had history. I was in a tight spot, asked for a loan. She gave it freely. As for Paris, I met a lady, yes, but Douvan. First I've heard of it." Poirot's gaze was relentless. "Do not play the fool, monsieur. The lady in Paris spoke of Santiago, a place tied to Paul Renaud's past and yours, I suspect. You knew him, did you not? In Chile, perhaps?" Stoner's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he would bolt. Then he leaned back, a wry smile on his lips. "Clever, aren't you? All right, I knew Renaud. Years ago in Santiago, he was a sharp operator, land deals, some less than legal. I was his agent, handled the paperwork. We parted ways when things got hot, but I never crossed him. And this woman in Paris?" Poirot pressed. "Her name? Her purpose?" Stoner shrugged. "She called herself Marie, no surname. South American, I'd guess, from her accent. She contacted me, said she had business with Renaud, wanted my help to reach him. I met her at the Café Toil, but she was cadgy, talked of Santiago, debts, nothing clear. I told her Renaud was in Merlinville, and that was that." I frowned, sensing half-truths. "And you didn't think to warn Renaud, or ask why she used Douvan?" Stoner's smile was thin. "I'm not a saint, Captain. I owed Renaud nothing, and Marie paid well for my silence. Besides, I was in Calais by then, out of the game." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the night of Renaud's murder, where were you?" "In Calais, Stoner said firmly. At a card game, till dawn. Ask the landlord here, he'll vouch for me. Poirot nodded, but his expression was unreadable. Merci, Monsieur Stoner. You will remain here until we verify your story. One word of advice, do not run. Hercule Poirot does not forget. As we left the hotel, I turned to Poirot, my voice urgent. He's lying, isn't he? That story about Marie, it's too neat, and he knows more about Duvon than he's letting on. Half lying, Poirot corrected, his tone thoughtful. Stoner is an opportunist, not a mastermind. His alibi will hold, I think, but his meeting with this Marie is no coincidence. She is our decoy, hired to muddy the waters, but by whom we must return to Merlinville and to Madame d'Aubreuil. The train back was a blur of gray fields and my churning thoughts. Stoner's revelations had confirmed a Santiago connection, but the woman posing as Duvon remained a phantom. At the Villa Genevieve, we learned from Bex that Giraud was still chasing leads in Paris. Convinced the fake Duvon was the killer, Poirot, unimpressed, requested a meeting with Madame d'Aubreuil and Marthe at the Villa Marguerite. We arrived at their ivy-clad home as the afternoon waned, the rose garden aglow in the soft light. Madame d'Aubreuil received us in the drawing room, her auburn hair impeccable, her green eyes wary. Marthe sat beside her, her violet eyes shadowed with worry, her hands clasped tightly. Monsieur Poirot, Madame d'Aubreuil said, her voice smooth but guarded. Your persistence is remarkable. What brings you back? We have told you all we know of the Renaulds. Poirot's smile was polite but piercing. Not all, madame. We have found a photograph, hidden in Paul Renault's study, dated Santiago, 1905. It shows a woman young, beautiful, remarkably like you. The word amour was written on it. Can you explain this? Madame d'Aubreuil's face paled, her composure cracking for the first time. Marthe gasped, her eyes darting to her mother. Mother, what does he mean? Poirot pressed forward, his voice soft but relentless. Madame, were you in Santiago? Were you Paul Renault's lover, perhaps known as Duvon? The room grew still, the only sound Martha's sharp intake of breath. Madame d'Aubreuil rose, her hands trembling, and for a moment I thought she would collapse. Then she spoke, her voice low and strained. You are mistaken, Monsieur Poirot. I was never in Santiago. I met Paul Renault here, in Merlinville years, after he returned from South America. That photograph, it must be another woman, someone he loved before Ella. I watched her closely, sensing a lie, but Poirot's gaze was unyielding. And yet, madame, the resemblance is striking. And your daughter, her presence at the villa, the day before the murder, with Jack. Did she see anything, hear anything, that you have not shared? Martha's eyes filled with tears, and she stood, her voice breaking. Stop this. I loved Jack, and I hated his father for keeping us apart, but I didn't hurt him. Mother, tell them, you had nothing to do with this. Madame d'Aubreuil's face hardened, and she placed a hand on Martha's shoulder. Enough, Marthe. Monsieur Poirot, my daughter is innocent, as am I. But I will confess one thing. I knew Paul Renault better than I admitted. He confided in me, months ago, about a woman from his past, a blackmailer, he called her, who threatened to ruin him. He never named her, but he feared her. I urged him to go to the police, but he refused. Poirot's eyes gleamed. This woman, did he describe her? A name, perhaps? She shook her head. No name, only that she was cunning, relentless. He said she was tied to Santiago, to his fortune. That is all I know. Marthe, trembling, spoke again. Monsieur Poirot, I overheard something that day at the villa. Jack was angry, saying his father had secrets, papers hidden in the study. I told Mother, because she asked me to watch Paul, to protect Jack. I stared, stunned. You spied on Renault. Martha's cheeks flushed. Not spying. I just listened. Mother was worried about Jack, about what Paul might do to him. Poirot nodded, his expression thoughtful. Merci, mademoiselle, madame. Your candor is illuminating. We will speak again. As we left the Villa Marguerite, I turned to Poirot, my voice urgent. Poirot, Martha's admission she was spying for her mother, and Madame Dubro's story about a blackmailer writ could be a cover. She might be Dubon. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Might mon ami, but might is not proof. Madame Dubro hides much, but her fear for Marthe is real. The photograph, the spying, they point to a past she wishes buried. Stoner, too, knows more than he tells. We must return to the villa. There is one final thread to pull. At the Villa Genevieve, we found Jack Renaud in the garden, his face pale and drawn. Poirot confronted him with Martha's confession. Watching his reaction closely, Marthe spied. Jack said, his voice a mix of anger and pain. I suspected she was curious, but I never thought. Look, Poirot, I told you about Paris, about Morel. What more do you want? The truth, Poirot said softly. You spoke of your father's secrets, papers in the study. What were they? Jack hesitated, then sighed. I found a letter, weeks ago, in his desk. It mentioned Santiago, a woman someone he paid to keep quiet. I confronted him, and he laughed it off, but I knew he was scared. I burned the letter. Didn't want mother hurt. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And this woman's name? Jack shook his head. It wasn't clear only. Initials MD. I thought it was a business deal. Not this, I gasped. MD Madame Dubro. Poirot's hand shot up, silencing me. Enough, Monsieur Jack. You have helped more than you know. Go to Marthe, but speak of this to no one. As we walked back to the hotel, the stars emerging in a velvet sky, I turned to Poirot, my mind reeling. MD, it's her, isn't it? Madame Dubreuil is Duvan, and she's behind it all. Poirot's voice was low, almost a whisper. Not all, Hastings, but close. The lover's secret is not love, but fear. Stoner, Madame Dubreuil, Jack, they circle the truth, but the center is Madame Renaud. Tomorrow, we unmask the spider. The web is complete. The night closed around us, Merlinville's lights faint against the darkness. The lover's secret had brought us to the edge of revelation, but the final truth remained shrouded, its shadow cast by a woman whose lies were as intricate as Poirot's logic. I could only follow, trusting his genius to light the way. Chapter 11. The unmasking. The morning of our final reckoning in Merlinville dawned with a crisp clarity, the sea sparkling under a sky unmarred by clouds. Hercule Poirot and I, Arthur Hastings, had reached a critical juncture in the investigation of Paul Renaud's murder. The web of clues, footprints, telegrams, crimson silk, a shattered watch, a veiled woman, and the elusive Duvin had tightened around a cast of suspects, each hiding fragments of the truth. Madame Eloise Renaud's blackmail by her former lover Gabriel Stoner, Madame Dubreuil's possible past as a Santiago beauty, and Jack Renaud's secretive Paris trip all pointed to a conspiracy rooted in Renaud's shadowy South American dealings. Poirot, his eyes alight with the fire of certainty, had declared the web complete. Today, he would reveal the spider. We gathered at the Villa Genevieve in the grand drawing room, its tall windows framing the sunlit gardens. The air was thick with anticipation, the scent of lilies mingling with the tension of those assembled. Madame Renaud sat erect, her black dress a stark contrast to her pale face, her hands clasped tightly. Jack Renaud stood by the fireplace, his expression a mix of defiance and dread. Madame Dubreuil and Marthe, summoned from the Villa Marguerite, occupied a settee, the mother's green eyes guarded, the daughter's violet ones wide with apprehension. Commissary Bex and Monsieur Hotet flanked the room, while Inspector Gilles, his sneer barely concealed, leaned against a bookcase, confident in his own theories. I took a chair near Poirot, my notebook ready. my heart pounding with the promise of revelation. Poirot stood at the room's center, his small frame commanding attention, his mustache immaculate, his voice clear and resonant. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, "we are here to unravel the truth of Paul Renault's murder, a crime of precision and deception, woven with lies, as delicate as silk and as deadly as a bullet. Hercule Poirot has promised to find the killer, and today, that promise is fulfilled." A murmur rippled through the room, but Poirot raised a hand, silencing it. "Let us begin with the crime itself. Paul Renaud, shot through the heart on his tennis court, half buried in a shallow grave. A single footprint, a shattered watch, a scrap of crimson silk, a cigarette stub. These were the clues left for us. But clues, they are like actors in a play, and not all speak the truth." He turned to Giraud, his smile polite but sharp. "Monsieur Giraud, you saw a tramp in the footprint, a simple robbery gone wrong. But the footprint was too perfect, too solitary, and the grave too hasty, for a thief who left no loot. Your science is admirable, but it missed the stage direction." Giraud's face reddened, but he said nothing, and Poirot continued, pacing slowly. "The watch, stopped at 2 o'clock, suggested a time of death, yet the doctor placed it between midnight and 3. The silk scrap, caught in the hedge, matched a shawl owned by Madame Renaud, yet she had not worn it in months. The cigarette stub, stained with lipstick, hinted at a woman's presence, yet Madame Renaud does not smoke. These were not clues, but props designed to mislead." Madame Renaud's hands tightened, and I saw Marthe glance at her mother, her lips trembling. Poirot's gaze swept the room, lingering on each face. Then came the letters, the telegrams, the name Duvon. A note in Renaud's pocket spoke of secrets and Santiago. A telegram warned of a shadow, a letter from Chile echoed the threat, and a photograph, hidden in a locked box, showed a woman beautiful, tied to Santiago, marked Amour. These pointed to a past, a secret Renaud died to protect or to conceal. He paused, drawing a small envelope from his pocket, the crimson silk scrap. "Let us start with the shawl. It was Madame Renaud's, yet Frank was the maid, swore it lay unworn until torn by a rosebush. The scrap in the hedge was planted, to implicate another Madame d'Albret, perhaps, whose own crimson silk was noted. But why? To divert suspicion, to cloud the truth." Madame d'Albret's eyes narrowed, but she remained silent. Poirot turned to Madame Renaud, his voice softening. "Madame, you told us of masked intruders, demanding Santiago, binding you and your husband. Yet the bindings were loose, easily slipped. You spoke of a veiled meeting with Gabriel Stoner, your former lover, to pay his blackmail. But the cigarette stub, the jasmine perfume, they do not fit. You are not at the tennis court, but you know who was." Her face drained of color, and she rose, her voice a whisper. "Monsieur Poirot, I have told you all I know. I loved Paul. I would never harm him." Poirot's eyes were relentless. "Love, madame, can be a motive as strong as hate. Let us turn to Santiago, to 1905. Paul Renaud made his fortune in Chile, but not alone. He had a partner, a woman, cunning, beautiful, known as Duvon. She was no adventuress, but his wife Eloise Renaud." A gasp filled the room. Jack staggered, his face ashen. "Mother, that's impossible." Poirot raised a hand, his voice firm. "Not impossible, Monsieur Jack. The photograph, marked Amour, was not of Madame Duprat, but of you, Madame Renaud, in your youth. You were Duvon, the swindler who aided Renaud's schemes, lend fraud, blackmail, perhaps worse. You built a fortune, then fled to France, to a new life. But the past followed." Madame Renaud sank back, her hands covering her face. Martha's eyes were wide with shock, and Madame Dubro's face was a mask, though her fingers trembled. Giraud snorted, but Poirot ignored him. Pressing on, Paul Renaud feared exposure not from a distant enemy, but from within. The telegram, the letter, they were warnings, yes, but staged, to create a narrative of external threat. The parcel, madame, was no book, but a gun, smuggled to your husband for protection or for murder, and the veiled woman in Paris, calling herself Duvan, a hired actress, paid by you, to confuse, to draw us from the truth. I stared, my mind reeling. Poirot, you mean Madame Renaud planned it all? He nodded, his voice grave. With an accomplice, Gabriel Stoner. He was no mere blackmailer, but your lover still, madame. Together, you plotted Paul's death. The motive, greed, and love. Paul's fortune was vast, but he grew cautious, hiding assets, fearing betrayal. You, madame, wanted it all in Stoner's freedom from his debts. The intrusion was a farce, staged to establish your victimhood. The loose bindings betray your complicity. Madame Renaud's voice was a sob. No, no, I loved Paul, I could not. Poirot's gaze was unyielding. You loved Stoner. More. The night of the murder, you lured Paul to the tennis court, perhaps with a false alarm. Stoner shot him a single, precise bullet. The shallow grave was your haste, interrupted by dawn. The footprint, the watch, the silk, they were your props, but flawed. The watch, smashed to suggest a false time, was too obvious. The footprint, pressed to mimic a tramp, lacked companions, and the cigarette stub your one mistake. You smoked, madame, that night, in a moment of nerves, leaving a trace Stoner could not erase. Jack lunged forward, his face contorted. You're lying. Mother would never. Poirot stopped him with a look. Monsieur Jack, your mother used you. The photograph, planted to implicate Madame Dubreuil, was meant to frame her as Duvan, a rival from Santiago. Your Paris trip, your debt's day, were distractions to muddy your alibi. But you are innocent, as is Mademoiselle Marthe. Marthy's tears fell, and Madame Dubreuil rose, her voice icy. This is outrageous, Monsieur Poirot. You accuse without proof. Poirot drew a folded paper from his paqueta-coated letter, found in Renaud's safe. Proof. Madame Dubreuil lies here. Decoded. It details Eloise's betrayal, her plan with Stoner. Paul knew, or suspected, and wrote it as insurance. He summoned me not for protection, but to expose her if he died. Madame Renaud collapsed, her sobs echoing in the stunned silence. Zero, for once speechless, stared as Bex and Jotet moved to her side. Poirot's voice softened, but his words were final. Madame, you and Stoner wove a clever web, but Hercule Poirot sees through the threads. The telegram, sent by Stoner to confuse the timeline, was traced to Calais. The actress in Paris, hired to play Duvan, has confessed her employer a man matching Stoner's description. And your perfume, jasmine, lingers on the cigarette stub. The game is over. Beck signaled the gendarmes, who gently took Madame Renaud's arms. She did not resist, her face a mask of defeat. Jack fell to his knees, his voice broken. Mother, why? Poirot turned to Chotet, his tone formal. Monsieur Stoner must be arrested in Calais. The evidence is clear, Madame Renaud, and he conspired to murder Paul Renaud for wealth and freedom. Madame Dubreuil, though complicit in secrets, is not the killer, nor is her daughter. Chotet nodded, his face grave. Monsieur Poirot, your genius is unparalleled. The case is closed. As the room emptied, Giraud approached, his sneer gone, replaced by grudging respect. You win, Poirot, but I'll beat you next time. Poirot's smile was serene. There is no next time, Monsieur Giraud. Truth needs no rival. Outside, the sun blazed, but a chill lingered in my heart. The unmasking was complete, yet the cost was heavy. Jack's grief, Martha's shock, a family shattered. Poirot, sensing my mood, placed a hand on my shoulder. Come, Hastings, he said softly. The truth is a bitter medicine, but but it heals. Let us walk by the sea. We left the villa, the weight of justice behind us. The mystery of Paul Renaud's death laid bare. Poirot's little gray cells had triumphed, but I knew the echoes of this case would linger. A testament to the shadows cast by love and greed. Chapter 12. The final clue. The sun hung low over Millionaire, painting the sea in hues of amber and rose, as Hercule Poirot and I, Arthur Hastings, walked along the coastal path. The Villa Genevieve fading into the distance behind us. The unmasking of Madame Eloise Renaud and Gabriel Stoner as the conspirators behind Paul Renaud's murder had left a bittersweet tang in the air. The web of deception woven with crimson silk, false footprints, a staged burglary, and the specter of Duvon had been unraveled by Poirot's relentless logic, yet the human cost lingered. Jacques Renaud's anguished cry for his mother, Marthe d'Aubreuil's tearful shock, and the quiet disgrace of Madame d'Aubreuil's half-revealed past weighed heavily on my mind. Poirot, however, seemed serene, his small frame moving with the calm assurance of a man who had restored order to chaos. "Hastings," he said, pausing to adjust his hat against the sea breeze. "You are pensive, mon ami. The case is solved. The guilty are in custody, yet you frown. Why?" I sighed, my gaze on the horizon. "It's the tragedy of it, Poirot. Jack, Marthe, they're innocent, yet their lives are shattered. And Madame Renaud, to think she loved Stoner enough to kill her husband. It's so senseless." Poirot's eyes twinkled, though his voice was gentle. "Senseless, perhaps, but human. Love and greed, they twist the heart into strange shapes. But come, let us review the final clue that sealed their fate. It is a lesson in method, Nan." We settled on a bench overlooking the cliffs, the waves crashing below with a rhythm that seemed to echo Poirot's precision. He drew from his pocket the coded letter found in Paul Renaud's safe, its cryptic symbols now decoded into a damning narrative. I leaned closer, eager to understand the last piece of the puzzle. The letter, Poirot began, was Renaud's insurance, written in fear of betrayal. But the final clue, Hastings, was the watch, the broken watch, stopped at 2 o'clock. It was not, as Giraud believed, a marker of the murder's hour. It was a lie, deliberately smashed to mislead. I frowned, recalling the watch's shattered face smashed. But why? To make us think the murder happened later. Precisement, Poirot said, his fingers steepled. Madame Renaud and Stoner knew the body would be found at dawn, when the gardener began his work. They needed to confuse the timeline, to suggest a later hour than the true one around midnight, as the doctor confirmed. The watch stopped at 2 was a clumsy attempt to imply a struggle at that time, diverting suspicion from their careful plan. I nodded, the pieces falling into place. So they shot Renaud at midnight, buried him hastily, and smashed the watch to throw us off. But the shallow grave, why not dig deeper? Poirot's smile was wry. Haste, mon ami, and fear. Stoner, a man of nerve but no patience, fired the shot. Madame Renaud, complicit but shaken, helped drag the body to the grave, a shallow one. For they heard a noise, perhaps a servant stirring. They fled, leaving the watch and the silk scrap as false clues. The cigarette stub, stained with Madame Renaud's lipstick, was her era moment of nerves, a puff to steady her hand. I stared, marveling at the simplicity of it, and the footprint. Giraud was so sure it was a tramp's. "A fabrication," Poirot said, his voice sharp. Stoner pressed a boot Renaud's own, with a worn heel into the clay, ensuring a single, clear mark. No other prints, for they were careful, but one was enough to mislead Giraud's science. I shook my head, awed by the deception's intricacy. And the telegram, the letter, the fake divan and parasol, to make us think an outsider. A ghost from Santiago was after Renaud. Poirot nodded, his eyes distant. The telegram, sent by Stoner from Calais, was a final touch to confuse the timeline, suggesting a threat that lingered after Renaud's death. The Parisian Duvon, hired by Stoner, was a decoy to draw us from Madame Renaud, the true Duvon of Santiago. The photograph, meant to implicate Madame de Brel, was a cruel stroke. Madame Renaud knew of her husband's old affection and used it to cast suspicion. I leaned back, the sea's roar filling the silence. But Madame de Bruchy wasn't entirely innocent, was she? Marthe, spying the Santiago connection. Poirot's expression grew somber. Madame d'Aubreuil was no murderer, but a woman of secrets. She knew Renaud and Santiago, perhaps as a friend, perhaps more. Her silence protected her daughter, not herself. Martha's spying was born of love for Jack, manipulated by her mother's fear of Renaud's power. They are guilty of omission, not blood. A thought struck me. And Jack? His Paris trip? The debt to Morel, was it really just a coincidence? Poirot chuckled softly. No coincidence, Hastings, but no crime. Jack's trip was his rebellion, his attempt to escape his father's control. His debt to Morel gave Madame Renaud an opportunity to ensure he was absent, unable to interfere. He is a victim, like Marthe, of a mother's betrayal. I sighed, the weight of the truth settling. So it's over. Madame Renaud and Stoner will face justice. But what of Jack and Marthe? Can they recover? Poirot's gaze softened, fixed on the sea. They are young, mon ami. Love and time heal much. Jack, cleared of suspicion, will find solace with Marthe, though Madame d'Aubreul's shadow may linger. She has fled Merlinville, I hear, perhaps to Paris, perhaps farther. Her secrets go with her, but they are no longer our concern. I glanced at him, surprised. Fled? You're letting her go? He shrugged, a Gallic gesture of indifference. She is no killer, and her daughter needs her. Hercule Poirot seeks justice, not vengeance. Let her run, her conscience will pursue her. We rose, the sun dipping toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the path. As we walked back to the hotel, a figure approached, Jack Renaud, his face pale but resolute, with Marthe at his side, her hand in his. They stopped, and Jack spoke, his voice steady. Monsieur Poirot, he said, I can't thank you enough. You saved me, cleared my name. Marthe and I we're leaving Merlinville, starting fresh. I just wanted you to know. Martha's eyes shone with tears, but she smiled. You gave us a future, monsieur. We won't forget. Poirot bowed, his manner gentle. Monsieur, mademoiselle, go with courage. The past is heavy, but the future is yours. They walked away, their figures silhouetted against the sunset, and I felt a stir of hope amidst the sorrow. Poirot, sensing my mood, clapped my shoulder. Come, Hastings. The case is closed, but life continues. A holiday, perhaps. The Riviera, calls Nan. I laughed, the tension easing. A holiday. After this, I need one. But knowing you, another mystery will find us before we unpack. His eyes twinkled, a familiar mischief in them. Perhaps, mon ami, perhaps, the little gray cells, they never rest. But for now, let us enjoy the sea, the sun, and the triumph of truth. We continued along the path, Merlinville's lights twinkling in the dusk. The tennis court, once a Stage 4, murder, lay silent, its secrets buried with Paul Renaud's shattered dreams. Poirot's genius had prevailed, the final clue the broken watch revealing the heart of a plot woven from love, greed, and betrayal. As the stars emerged, I felt the weight of the case lift, replaced by the quiet certainty that, with Poirot, no shadow could hide for long.